good afternoon. At the outset, let me thank school principal Anne Corrine and everyone here at PS 81 for hosting us today. She's been the principal here for 1 year, assistant principal for 10 years before that.
Yes.
And this is one of those great schools that give our kids the opportunity to share in the great American dream. If they do well here, they're going to have a great career in front of them. And if we don't find a ways to give all the kids the kind of education you get when you go to PS 81, we're going to leave too many kids behind. Tomorrow is the final day of classes for students here and at public schools throughout the city, and thanks to a new state law, students here and everywhere in the city should soon find traveling to and from school a much safer experience. And that's because for the first time ever, sounds hard to believe, but for the first time ever, we're going to be able to install speed cameras at up to 20 locations, including this one, all of which are near schools in the 5 boroughs. Pictures taken by these cameras will identify speeding vehicles, and then we'll use those pictures to ticket the vehicle owners. And hopefully people will stop speeding, particularly near schools where it puts our kids in a dangerous situation. It would be wonderful if we never ticketed anybody, and if that's the case, the cameras will certainly have paid for themselves in a real sense, maybe not in dollars, but in terms of lives saved. And I did want to, while our administration has worked on this for a long time, I want to acknowledge the efforts of Senate Majority Coalition Leader Jeff Klein in helping us pass it, and also thank Senate Majority Co-Leader Dean Skelis and the Assembly Speaker Shelley Silver for strongly supporting it. The locations where we've installed these speed cameras have all one thing in common, or several things in common. They're all on a map that the City Department of Transportation released earlier this year. All are within a quarter mile of a school, and each of them speed gun tests showed that at least 75% of the drivers who drove by faster than the speed limit. And like so many other locations that we studied, the intersection of Riverdale Avenue and 256th Street, where this school is located, also has had a number of traffic accident injuries. In fact, there were 10 such injuries during the 4 years ending 2011, the last full year for which we have records. The evidence from our city and from around the country tells us that speed cameras will be a big safety plus for our students. Take our red light cameras, for example. The record shows that there has been a 56% decline in serious injuries and a 44% drop in pedestrian injuries at our 150 red light camera intersections. Just think about that. We have cut the number of serious injuries, and particularly pedestrian injuries, in half by having red light cameras up. Anybody that says this does not work as a deterrent just doesn't look at the numbers. And in the cities and towns across this country that already use speed cameras, the results are clear. Speed cameras throughout the country reduce speeds and save lives. In New Orleans, for example, speed cameras led to an 84% drop in speeding, and other research shows that speed cameras reduce injuries and fatalities by something between 40 and 45%. Our administration has made big strides in improving traffic safety for motorists, for cyclists, and pedestrians. We've cut traffic fatalities in our city by 30% during the last decade, and our traffic fatality rate is half of other major cities. But speeding does remain the single biggest contributor to fatal traffic accidents in the 5 boroughs, and speed cameras will be another important weapon in our campaign to combat speeding. Other elements of that campaign include the red light cameras I mentioned, the NYPD's commitment to aggressive traffic safety enforcement, and our program of creating neighborhood slow zones where we cut the speed limit to 20 miles per hour and take other measures to reduce vehicle speed. There are currently 10 such slow zones around the city, and we expect to have instituted at least another 14 by the end of the year. Now, exploring new policies and practices that improve traffic safety is also a major focus of my philanthropic work. We've tested various programs in nations around the world to see how we can reduce injuries. And we've seen some incredible results that have saved a lot of lives. Transportation Commissioner Jeanette Sadik-Khan is working towards those goals on New York City streets, too. So let me now turn things over to her. Jeanette?
Great. Thank you, Mayor Bloomberg. And it is great to be here with the parents and the teachers and the students at PS 81 to support this new law, which puts down a roadblock against dangerous driving. And too many drivers try to pull a fast one on the streets near New York City schools. And with this new law, thanks to the leadership of Senator Klein, we can move full speed ahead on safety and bring an extra set of eyes to the road. And something as simple as a camera can save lives. Not far from here, on Fieldston Road, we did some surveys and found that 96% of drivers were exceeding the speed limit. And 96% gets you an A+ in school, but 96% of cars speeding on our streets gets you a failing grade. And as we talk about percentages, I think it's important to remember this one. If you are hit by a car going 40 miles an hour, there's a 70% chance you will die. If you are hit by a car going 30 miles an hour, there's an 80% chance you will live. That's why it's 30. And the difference of 10 miles an hour makes the difference between life and death. And school may be almost out for summer, but at the Department of Transportation, we're working year-round, putting the brakes on rampant speeding with neighborhood slow zones, with our Safe Routes to School program, engineering streets, and with a big safety education campaign. And this work has helped us deliver the safest streets in New York City history, and we're confident that these speed cameras will help drive down those numbers of injuries and fatalities even further. And I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg for his leadership in this arena and Senator Klein for his leadership in combating dangerous driving and making New York an even safer city. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Let me just say one more time, because it does bear repeating. It certainly deserves to be repeated. Jeff Klein was the difference between getting this bill through and not getting this bill through. Senator Skelos and Assemblymember Silver were helpful, as were their members, but you always need a champion, somebody that's willing to fight and to cajole and do all the things to get legislation passed. And this is a good piece of legislation. It will certainly save lives, and Jeff Klein should have a big smile on his face, because those lives he has as much, should take as much credit for saving as anybody else. Jeff,
thank you, Mayor.
Happens to be true.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Mayor Bloomberg, for your leadership. Thank you, Commissioner Sadik-Khan, all of our parents, our principal. I feel I should have a classroom at PS 81. This is the third time I've been here in the last week. But it was about 10 days ago when myself and our Transportation Commissioner, Commissioner Sadik-Khan, stood in front of PS 81. And at that time, I made a promise. I made a promise that in the last week of the legislative session, we would get legislation passed to implement a pilot program for speed cameras at our schools in New York City. And we kept that promise. And the promise was made because of a very simple reason, the safety of our young people. Yesterday, I was one of the guest speakers at the PS 81 fifth grade graduation. And at that time, we sent off our young people with what I believe, and I know the mayor believes, the best public education anywhere. But one thing we have to make sure that it's not about scholastic achievement necessarily, but it's also about their personal safety. And I believe it's unconscionable for anybody to speed in a school zone. But unfortunately, based on a study that was implemented by the Department of Transportation, it happens each and every day. Right here in PS 81, this school has the dubious distinction of having the highest speeding rate of any school in the Bronx. 96%. 96% of the cars that go by this school are speeding. And when you go 5 to 10 miles above the speed limit, you're more likely to cause death in an accident. So I think this is a smart, common sense approach, which is going to make people think. You know, when we pass laws in Albany, sometimes they just have a chilling effect. And I think this will have a chilling effect. I think people are going to think twice before they speed at a school, before they hit that accelerator when they know they're going to get caught by a speed camera. So I think what we did here today is protect the safety of our most precious resource, our young people. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone involved. This is a great victory for the kids of the city of New York. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you and congratulations. Let me ask Chief James Tuller of the NYPD's Transportation Bureau to comment on our speeding camera initiative. This guy knows as much about transportation as almost anybody, with a possible exception of the commissioner, and I say that only because I have to deal with her later on today. The chief, really, all kidding aside, is an expert and knows what goes on the streets. Chief.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Listen, thank you very much for having the police department here. The speed cameras certainly will go a long ways to the deterrence of speeding. In addition to the enforcement that the NYPD does, so far this year we're up 11% in speed enforcement. The traffic safety teams at each of the precincts are tasked with analyzing accidents or collisions within the precincts. So as they identify locations where speeding occurs, they will deploy their enforcement personnel. So working with DOT, working with the communities, we identify those locations and we deploy. That is the reason that citywide we're up 11%, and we will continue to strive and continue to enforce the speed enforcement, in addition to over 1 million summonses that we issued last year. It's quite a deterrent. So I really commend the enforcement, and the cameras together will go a long ways to saving lives. Thank you very much.
Chief, thank you. Our push for speed cameras has the active backing of key transportation safety groups, including the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, and it's fair to say that this measure would never have come to pass without the strong and effective advocacy of another group, Transportation Alternatives. They've been pushing for speed cameras for many years, long before it became an acceptable idea here or anywhere else in the nation. They've been big supporters of all our administration's efforts to make city streets safer for everyone, and I would like to ask the Executive Director of Transportation Alternatives, Paul Steely-White, for his comments. Paul? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bloomberg. It's really an honor to stand up here with our city leaders, our state leaders, and celebrate this enormous win for the children of New York City. We all know how dangerous drunk driving is. We all know how dangerous distracted driving is. Here in New York, speeding drivers kill and injure more New Yorkers than distracted driving and drunk driving combined. So this is really a much-needed, long-overdue safety measure on our streets. As Mayor Bloomberg said, other cities and states are using speed cameras to provide consistent enforcement and saving lives all over the country. As he pointed out, these cameras work better in dense urban areas where there's lots of pedestrians and increasing numbers of cyclists. So we know here in New York that we have more pedestrians than anyone in the country, so it's really a much-needed step forward for New York to finally get these life-saving cameras. Finally, I just want to also acknowledge and thank Assemblymember Deborah Glick. She's been sponsoring this legislation in the Assembly for many years, and she stood up again this year. And also the members and advocates and families that we work with at Transportation Alternatives. We have people on staff who have had loved ones seriously injured by speeding drivers. We have board members and members who have had loved ones killed and injured by speeding drivers. So to have their moral authority on this campaign and working hand in hand with law enforcement and our city leaders, our state leaders, there's much more that we can do working together to ensure that safe streets are a priority in our city and in our state. And then really just finally, I wanted to say that in addition to saving lives and preventing injuries, this will make it possible for more kids to walk and bike to school. Many of you in the room, as myself, remember walking and biking to school as a youngster, and those rates have been diminishing over the years, largely because of the reckless and dangerous driving that happens on our streets. So it's another added benefit, health. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Before taking on-topic questions, let me just summarize today's announcement for our Spanish-speaking New Yorkers. Vamos a empezar a instalar cámaras de control de velocidad cerca de escuelas, donde hemos visto que el exceso de velocidad ha sido un grave problema. And with that, we'll be happy to take on-topic questions.